So here we are, Nicky. It's that time of year again. The greatest show on turf. Looking forward to the 4 days of great racing from Cheltenham. And you are the winningmost trainer in the UK, of course, as you well know. And you are bidding to win a Unibet Champion Hurdle for a 9th time. Epatante is your representative this year. She won it, of course, 2 years ago. How has she been since we last saw her in the Christmas Hurdle at Kempton?
Everything's gone well. I mean, to be fair, I think, as we probably said before, you know, talking to JP at the beginning of the season, we had decided that, you know, she had two objectives: the fighting 5th at Newcastle, and then the Christmas Hurdle, and anything else would be a bonus. They were our obvious two targets. We nearly got away with both. We had to halve one and won the other. And she was very impressive at Kempton at Christmas, and everything was right. So here we had, you know, then we've had a good break, freshened up, started again. We're back where we were at the beginning, I hope. She seems in very good form. She's been working very well. She's got a school to come before she goes there. You know, we're getting all the right vibes from her. Now, I mean, you still got the problem of honeysuckle, which is you know, we knew, that's why we said, look, win the fighting 5th, win the Christmas Hurdle, we've had a good year. So we've had a good year, but obviously we're keen for more. And she's well up for this, and she's undoubtedly in better shape than she was this time last year. So, yeah, I can't tell you we're going to beat Honeysuckle, but we'll give it a jolly good go.
She's a 10-to-1 chance with Unibet, and as you said, Honeysuckle is the one that they've all got to catch. But
yeah.
You've mentioned, haven't you, sort of quite publicly, you've treated her for back problems and so forth, and she, you know, if all things go well...
That's what I think helped her from last season to this season, and where at least she started off, you know, racing both at Newcastle and Kempton. She was racing like her old, enthusiastic, slick hurdling self. Good to watch.
Okay, so let's move on to the Supreme. You've got two runners in this year's race. You've won it 4 times before, more recently, of course, with Shishkin. Constitution Hill is the 9-to-4 favourite with Unibet at the moment, and then Jonbon in there at 4-to-1. Constitution Hill has a great constitution, I think would be fair to say, wouldn't it?
Well, he's a sort of very dopey one. I mean, he's lovely. Actually, Barry Geraghty called in last night. He came to see him and he thought he looked fantastic. Because I bought him off him. And I mean, he's an extraordinary horse because, I mean, several times I rang Barry early on and said, listen, hang on, I thought you told me this was meant to be a good horse. I mean, he'd actually been beaten in his point-to-point. I think that didn't go according to plan either. But I thought, I mean, it could, when we were walking and trotting in the early part of the season, I mean, it couldn't keep up. And we started hacking around, and it just looked like a bus. And he said, I promise you it's all right. I said, but it just doesn't it wouldn't light anybody's fire. But, you know, amazingly, as he started to do some work, there was suddenly one morning, Charlie Morlock and I were stood on the top, we were using the Jockey Club gallops, and I stuck him in behind a couple of horses and said, well, if you can join them, do. Well, I didn't expect it to even get to them. But it not only got to them, it suddenly shut off and finished 20 lengths in front. And we looked rather bemused and thought we'd better check the other two. But it wasn't. It was suddenly that it found a button, which, well, we'd found where the button was, and if you press it, it works. And he's extraordinary. He's all the pace in the world. He'll go to sleep, he'll relax, and he'll just do exactly what you want to do. And he's been the same the whole way through. He was in both his races. He was very impressive in the Tolworth. He just basically galloped off without them both times. In very soft ground, yes, but that doesn't worry me. I mean, he worked at Kempton the other day. He was just as good on lovely ground. Everything's gone well, touch wood. Like any other race, you've got to have a bit of luck in running. Things have got to go right. I think there's sure to be pace. I think Willie will be, he's got some fastish horses there that'll be up there, so I don't think that'll worry us. He's got stamina, but the one thing he has got is a turn of foot. You know, he's got such a high cruising speed, and he can kick off it. And I'm hoping that's what will happen after the last.
And this is a very similar scenario to, 3 or 4 years ago when you had Autor and Bouverdere both running in the Supreme, and I always used to say to you, come on Nicky, which is the one you fancy most? And you always tended to keep your cards quite close to your chest. This year, of course, you've got Jonbon, the stablemate who's taken on Constitution Hill, another horse who comes into this race unbeaten under rules. What are there any similarities between those two, and what's Jonbon been showing you since he last won at Haydock?
Well, there's no similarity between the two whatsoever, except they're both very good, which is great. And that's why they've got to take each other on, because they are, and they're entitled to take each other on. But they are complete opposites. While Constitution Hill is asleep, Jonbon is, he's calmed down a heck of a lot. He's much more relaxed than he used to be. He used to be a very busybody, very fidgety, but just wants to get on with it. Would get a bit warm from time to time, even in his stable if something was upsetting him. He was easily upset. You had to be very careful with him in every way and just keep the whole thing calm. And he's been very good throughout the whole of the last, since, actually before his last run, but and since then particularly. Took him to Kempton on the Tuesday. If he was going to boil over while we were letting him walk round the pre-parade ring, I would have happily just put him straight back in the horse box and brought him home and left it at that. But he was very sensible. He walked round on his own. I don't know if you remember seeing him when we did much the same thing on the Tuesday before the Ladbroke weekend. We took him to Newbury, and because he was going to make his debut at the meeting. And I took him to Newbury, and it was 50-50 whether we let him have a spin round the racecourse or not. And he did get very warm that day. But still, we decided to let him have his solo spin and just have a nice time. And he was good, and he was very good at Newbury. And he started at Ascot in the Kennelgate. And he's been very good all the way, but as I say, I think what has happened is he's a much more relaxed horse. So the preliminaries are going to be...
That was my question. I mean, it's the first race of the meeting, first time as well with a large crowd. Of course, we weren't there last year, so there's going to be some atmosphere, won't there?
Well, he wasn't there.
No, I mean the first time there haven't been people there.
There is, but probably the first race is going to help him. Do you know what I mean? That's it. It's got the least atmosphere about it. It's got a lot of atmosphere about it, but at least the loudspeakers aren't going to be blasted. Well, they are. They never stay silent, do they? But somehow the fact you haven't got a race going on and horses running around you all over the place, I think will help him. He'll be having earplugs in. They tend to, if everything's going right, we take them out at the start. But they just help him get through the preliminaries without too much fuss. He'll be warm, yes, I'd be pretty sure about that. I hope he doesn't melt. But it's possible. I mean, I can't guarantee him, but he's a different person to what he was earlier on in the year, definitely.
If we go back to the Rossington Main at Haydock, a lot of people, rightly or wrongly, were sort of almost crabbing the performance. He wasn't quite as impressive as people thought he should have been. What were your thoughts after that race?
My thoughts were it was, in polite words, pretty messy ground on what I'm afraid I have to call a pretty messy track these days. It's hard to be a smart horse in horrible ground. I thought he was good. He quickened up twice, actually, and he quickened up and went away at the end. It just was a rather messy race altogether. But he needed a run then. It helped us sort of take the edge off him again and build him back up again. So.
And some bookmakers even pushed him out for the Supreme and shortened him up for the Ballymore. Was there ever any thought in your mind that you may just switch to the longer distance Novice?
There hasn't. You could switch either of them to the Ballymore, to be honest with you. I wouldn't have any worry that they both stay 2.5. But JP and his team, we've discussed it. We haven't really ever discussed the Ballymore. And nor have I with Michael on Constitution, to be honest with you. I think it's just been a given thing that they're both going to run in the Supreme. Neither are frightened of each other. Fair play. Bring it on. I mean, we probably need two. The opposition's going to have more than two, that's for sure. I.e. in Willie. And he's got some pretty smart horses there. So we've got to be ready. So maybe we're just as well off having two there to try and... It's a very important race, the first race, for a multitude of reasons. One is if you can win it, from one's own point of view, it takes all the pressure off. You can crack on from there. Do you know what I mean? If you've got that, we always say we'll settle for one. Well, I will. But if you've got one, then you want two. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You want to go on. But that first one, if you can get that out of the way in the first race, then the show can really crack on. And you can march on with confidence and, right, we've got one. The scoreboard might even say England 1, Ireland 0. Well, that would be a good start anyway.
So you go there with as big amount of confidence as you did when you went there with Altior and Bouvedere that you will win the Supreme?
No, because I will admit that when Altior went there and Ireland was screaming Min that year, and they've always got their unbeatables, haven't they? Yeah. And that year it was Min, and we were quietly doing our own thing. I was very, very confident. I've seldom been that confident that there wasn't a horse that could beat Altior at that stage. And I'd watched Min, yeah, and he'd looked very good, but I couldn't. Altior was you were never going to say it beforehand, I promise you. I'm not going to say it to you today.
I was going to say, you're not going to say it today either.
But he was that's as confident as I've ever been about anything, that they wouldn't beat him. I mean, I wouldn't even been as confident with Shishkin last year. With Altior, things, yeah, he was just at that stage of his life, he was all through his life. He was a very, very classy horse, and he was at his peak at that period.
In the Mares' Hurdle, you've got Marie's Rock on day one. Got the job done nicely, didn't she, at Warwick last time? I was impressed. And to be fair, 2 years ago, we thought she was going to win the Mares' Novice Hurdle. And she went wrong the week before, and it was tragic for the sort of Midland Park team, if you like. It's tragic for anybody when you get knocked out in the last week. That's why it's just no fun for any of us. It's horrible because there's something waiting to go wrong every day. And you're going to read the paper every day and there's going to be another, big name probably out. It's bound to happen. Horses are very, very fickle things. They've got to be kept up to their work. You can't afford to wrap them up in cotton wool and put them in the boxes because they won't be ready. So they've got to go through the processes. They've got to school. They've got to gallop. When you're doing that, you're going to get problems. She went wrong just before that. And as I say, we've got no reason why she wasn't. Nothing much happened last year. She hadn't sort of recovered that form from the year before at all. But this year's changed dramatically back again. She was good at Kempton, wasn't she?
We put her up to 2.5 miles. She was very impressive at Kempton the first time. Got knocked over at the first in the Lanzarote, so that was totally excusable. And then went to that listed race at Warwick. I thought she was very good. What she was doing is really staying through the line. I mean, she was very, very strong at the finish. And she'd have gone round again. She doesn't have to go round again, but there'll be more stamina involved in this, and I think she has that. She's gradually looked as she's improving. I mean, she's in there with a squeak. Yes, she jolly is.
The feature race on the second day of the festival is, of course, the Queen Mother Champion Chase, a race you've won 6 times before. Shishkin is your representative this year. He's 8-11 favourite. Done absolutely nothing wrong. He's unbeaten. Got the better of Energomain at Ascot last time. How did he come out of that race, first of all?
He came out of that very well. He's a tough devil because, you know, he had a tough race. It had to be tough. There were 2 very good horses. It was you know, as you know, it was billed as one of the epics, and so I think rightly so. They're 2 very, very good horses. It looks as though they'd got us in trouble. The one good thing about Shishkin is he's a fighter, if nothing else, but he's got class as well, and he's got stamina. You know, there's only a length in it. A length is nothing over, you know, we've had a period of 6-8 weeks since then. A lot of water's gone under the bridge, a lot of things can happen. It's a different day, it's a different track, a different ground. It only needs one good jump and one mistake and this, that and the other, and your length's gone. So it's still it's as good a race on paper coming into it as was the Ascot race. And then you're going to bring Chacun Pour Soi into it as well. I know there are question marks about him, but I know I was sort of with Willie the other day, and it sounded to me, unless I don't know whether he was on tactics or actually sort of telling us really what he thought. You got the feeling that Chacun Pour Soi was sort of coming into his number 1 slot. Slightly surprisingly, thinking, well, Energonine can't beat Shishkin. Well, as I say, it was only a length, and a lot of things can happen. I think we do have the fact that it's left-handed slightly in our favour. It'll suit Shishkin better. I don't say it won't suit Energonine, but I mean, it will suit Shishkin going left better than right. So we've got a few things in our favour. The hill will help him. Good gallop will help him. I can see Chacun Pour Soi setting off. And, you know, I know he hasn't yet done it in England, but he's still a very good horse.
What do you think Shishkin's biggest asset is?
I think he's probably his temperament to the whole thing, actually. Just very, very professional. He's not as he's not the show-off that Sprinter was, or Altior for that matter. You know, he doesn't jump like they did. He's just got a very economic way of getting from A to B. But he's very proficient, he's just very professional. He is the ultimate professional.
Dusart, a real interesting contender for you, Nicky, in the Brown Advisory Novices Chase, also known as the RSA. A 14-1 shot with Unibet. I know you're not a betting man, but do you think that could be good value for punters out there?
Well, there are 2 things. He hasn't much experience. He's only had 2 runs over hurdles. Very, very impressive at Newbury. Then had a horrible accident. Then, I actually ran him in a 2-mile Grade 1 Novice Hurdle at Aintree. Well, that was blatantly too short for him, but he was still 3rd. And it was a remarkable performance. And we knew he wanted further. I didn't anticipate him having to go 3 miles quite as soon as this, I must admit. I thought he was sharper than that. But he's had 2 runs over fences. They haven't been electrifying. The first day was at Leicester, when there weren't any fences in the back straight. So they start down the back straight. So you canter all the way down the back, over the top of the hill, round a bend. You've gone 3/4 of a mile, suddenly come round a corner, down a hill, boom, there's a fence in front of you. Ah! What's that doing there? Sort of took him by surprise. Jumped out to the left, did this and that and the other. He won well enough in the end, but it wasn't. But there were only 6 fences or something. But he did jump left. Then, not surprisingly, he also said, well, could he be so stupid as to go to Exeter and go right-handed again, which we did. And he was good, but he did jump to the left, particularly when he got left on his own at the end. He hasn't had the easiest preparation. His form doesn't tell you he's good enough in his own way, But on the other hand, we all know what he is capable of, and he is a very good horse. He's got to be a totally different kettle of fish anyway, but going left-handed will certainly make a big difference. If everything went right, you could see him coming in, but he's coming into a very, very hot division here that's going to be extremely cheapest. Whatever wins this will be favourite for next year's Gold Cup. Whether it's going to be Doucet, I'm not quite sure.
Do you still believe that he could be, proper top-notch in say, a year's time?
I do, yes. I mean, it could easily be a year too soon for him, even at this stage. He's a tough old devil. I think he'll cope with this and come back from it. Yes, I do. I mean, I hope he'll still finish up a top-class horse.
The Coral Cup, you've won it 4 times before. Call Me Lord, who is another animal that's got a lot of class when things go his way, isn't it?
Well, he has. Then don't go his way because he's got himself into a fierce position as far as the handicap's concerned. Just probably short of a Grade 1 horse anyway. But he's won the International at Cheltenham. He's won Love Sandown. Probably might prefer going right-handed, but I don't think it's essential. This is probably what he'll run in, because he's got to run in something. He's a Cheltenham horse. Where else do you go? 2.5 is probably the right trip for him. He could pop up quite easily. He's well capable of it. He seems in good order. He'll go there, yeah.
And I Am Maximus put up a very good performance behind Hillcrest at Cheltenham last time, just going down to finish second. And he's in there off 1-3-4. Would that be quite a nice handicap
well,
mark
I
for
think
him?
it's quite a tempting mark if you think that we're thinking about the Ballymore, and you'll be taking on 140 sort of 5 horses at level weights. Well, then, if that's the case, if you're thinking you can do that, then you've got to be relatively hopeful about being in a handicap off 134, haven't you? You're getting the £10 off your 145s. It must make some sort of sense to actually run him in the handicap. But he's only a novice, and maybe he's better off in a novice. We'll see which. I mean, we've still got the options.
On to the third day, you've got Champ, who represents you in the Stayers Hurdle. You last went with Bacchanal back in 2000. And Punches Downs was actually beating this, wasn't he? Behind Big Bucks. Little bit to know how good he go on to be.
Yeah.
Champ looked very good at Ascot, didn't he? And won his penultimate run, and then ran. What would you say? What were your opinions on that race at Cheltenham?
A bit flat or a bit. I don't know. I just never quite happy all the way round at Cheltenham. He just didn't seem to. He wasn't travelling the same way he travelled at Ascot. He was hard on it at Ascot the whole way. He was tanking through the race. And I didn't think he was even ready. I thought, well, you've got to blow up in the middle and in a minute, and he jumps the second last. He's still hard on the bridle. Cheltenham, no real excuses, except he just wasn't travelling as well. Fair play to Paisley Park. He not only beat us, they gave us a 10-length start. That was a very good performance by them. But I hope we're a bit better than that. Did you
leave a little bit to work on from Trials Day?
Well, I hadn't necessarily sort of left it there. I just was taking each step at a time, really. It was the obvious stepping stone from Ascot, which is in December. That was too long to go till March. The obvious thing to go was for Trials Day, and yeah, I wasn't that happy, to be honest with you. We've just got a few things to do. I've got to get a bit happier too. I'd like to see, the little green shoots need to perk up, and I think they just might be.
Because on his day, he's very good, as we saw in the RSA offences.
RSA and all sorts of races. He's top class, yes.
The Temps, the race, of course, you've got to qualify to get into, Nicky, over the 3 miles on the Thursday. You've got 2 engaged. Dane de Compagnie's a 20-1 shot, and Mill Green, who's in there off 1-8, 25-1. Both would have solid each-way chances, wouldn't they?
Well, I would have thought so, yeah. And they qualified in rather in different circumstances. Not surprising. I mean, I was trying to win the races, but I did point out to pilots in both situations that keep counting what's in front of you, because you need to finish 6th or better. Dame de Company struggled round. She ran a horrible race, to be honest with you. Not sure she wasn't just the only. I think she was last to finish, but she was 6th.
But she's got a good record at Cheltenham.
She has a good record at Cheltenham. And at the moment, she's in very good form. She worked very, very well at Kempton. We've been taking up sort of lead or pace-making roles in her work, and she's been loving it. And she was very good at Kempton, and we were very pleased. So, I mean, if she's come back, that's great. She's won the Coral, yeah. Might be, maybe take a lot of these mares come to in the spring, and let's go. I hope she can.
And Mill Green's got experience around Cheltenham as well, and ran well when second at Haydock.
Again, I'd said there were 12 odd runners at Haydock in horrible ground, which I thought he'd hate. He wasn't exactly as tuned up as I would have liked. We'd been chasing with him, and he'd had a bit of a break. And all I said is, keep counting. If you're 7th, well, turning in, you'd better get into 6th quite soon, and then see that you can hold that and go 5th. Anyway, I mean, he crept and crept and crept, and by a mistake, 2 out, he didn't nearly have won. He was a good second. And that was a solid performance. I'm rather looking forward to running him.
The Ryanair is always a tricky race to try and win. You've just got one entry this year, Mr. Fisher, who's a 16-1 chance. Again, he's very much sort of ground dependent, isn't he?
He is really. I mean, he ran in the Ascot Chase the other day, which had always been the plan. It looked the right race for him, but it was just too soft. He ran well for a long way. I mean, he would run if it was good ground, but it must be that. Otherwise, it's surely better to wait for Aintree or Perth or Punchestown or Plumpton or, I don't know. He's won the Peterborough. Any more peace?
Well, sticking with the P's, we'll look at the plate, the handicap chase over 2.5 as well. Fusel Raffles and Falco Blitz are your entries in that. And Fusel Raffles, in handicap company off 149. Obviously, he's very high in the weights now, but he's a very high class horse. Very.
He's already won the Charlie Hall this year, and he's been placed, and he's a lovely horse. He's just sort of having a little freshen up at the moment. He wants to be fresh, but he schooled this morning and he was great. Again, pretty much like Mr. Fisher, he does want good ground. They're quite similar horses. 2.5 miles on good ground is what they both want. And he'd be very effective if it was good ground. And I think he'd have a good chance. He is high in the handicap, but he's a class horse.
And Falco Blitz?
Falco Blitz, I don't know. Again, has to have good ground. Really likes small fields, which doesn't suggest you this is the ideal contest, because you're going to get a full field, there's no doubt about that. But we'd certainly look at it if the ground was good. And I think you'll probably find there's Pistol Whip's probably in there as well, isn't he? Again, he worked very well at Kempton. He essentially wants a small field on good ground. Well,
might get the good ground.
I might get the good ground. They're not going to get the small field, but he's quite a decent horse. I think he's very badly handicapped. He really is badly handicapped. I mean, he just had one little patch at the back of the last season when his form came together on the ground and everything, and some sort of a sense, small fields on good ground. And he got fierce hikes, and he really is too high.
Let's look at the mare's Novice. You've got two runners in it, both big prices with Unibet. The horse with no name, 40-1 shot, tweed skirt, 66s. But again, both of them wouldn't be out of it on their very best form.
No, they're good mares. They probably haven't been sort of horse with no name. We've been. She'd won 3 on the flat, and we've been campaigning her since day one in listed races. And she's run some really good races. She's been second a couple of times. She's got oodles of black type. She's won 3 on the flat. Winning another Novice Hurdle, or a Novice Hurdle, isn't really going to increase her pedigree. But she'll be off to stud. So the answer really was, why not?
Yeah.
She's in very good form. She went to Kempton, had a good gallop. She's in great shape, freshened up and all ready to go. And then it's off to go and see Golden Horn.
And Tweed Skirt, off to Scotland?
She's a good mare. She might want decent ground. She's quite a good front runner. She's got some good solid form. The boys are keen to go and give it a roll, so fine. Why not? You don't know. They're both very decent mares.
The Kimure, always a great race for the amateur riders. We saw Mr. Coffee score this morning. He's a 16-1 shot. And I know we spoke to you at the beginning of the season, and you had sort of high hopes for him in Novice Chase division. And, you know, albeit he's still unexposed in that sphere.
Well, he's unexposed because the idiotic trainers run him 3 times the wrong way round. It was pretty obvious after he ran a very good race at Kempton. You'd have to say if he hadn't jumped out to his left, he would have won. But then trainer promptly sends him straight back to Sandown, right-handed, and ran him in a Grade 1, the Scilly Isles. And he ran a good race. He was second. Fair enough, beaten a very long way. But he jumped round well, but again, he was jumping to his left. So now what we're doing is coming into a handicap, going the right way round, over 3 miles for the first time, which is blatantly what he's been crying out for. This wasn't a plotted sort of un-Henderson-like coup. It was just that, yeah, I just thought the Scilly Isles was there and nothing was going to run in it. And yeah, he ran great. He was second. It was, financial reward was great. A lot better than winning a Novice Chase. And I was aware it was the wrong way around. But he hasn't, he's yet to win a chase, but he's pretty solid. He's very solid. I mean, what he didn't do to the open ditch in front of the stands at Sandown that day. I mean, you have never seen such a hole in a fence and a horse stand up. I mean, he must be like a tank. Well, he is like a tank. I mean, he just broke the whole fence and didn't stop him at all. But that's him. He's a bit of a big bruiser.
I mean, you said he's stepping up in trip, and he's in sort of an early stage of his career. He was a bit of a runaway, wasn't he? Sort of
He was
quite
absolutely
headstrong.
tearaway. We couldn't stop him at all.
He settled down a lot at home and in his races now, wasn't he?
Huntington one day. I mean, it was probably the fastest 2 miles, 1 mile you ever saw. Absolutely crazy.
Janique is also in the race, Nicky. Carries the colours of Simon and Isaac. Will be partnered by Ben Bromley if he takes his chance.
I think that's the idea, that he might well run if you know, we're happy with him and everything. It depends on the next week, but he seems in very good form. He's hiding his light somewhere. I mean, this horse comes out every morning squealing and bucking and, well, I'm feeling wonderful. And then he goes and works and, he doesn't seem very bothered about it. But he's perfectly capable. There's a key somewhere. I've got to find it. I tried dropping him out in a race the other day. He absolutely hated it. So we'll have to, if he runs, he'll have to just get up there and get on with it.
Chantry House, who represents you in the Gold Cup. He was very prominent in the market around this time last year. He's a much bigger price now, around 20-1. Another one of yours, Nicky, that won his race, did what he had to do on Trials Day, but people sort of still weren't that impressed with him as a Gold Cup trial. What did you think after winning the Cotswold?
Nor was I. He didn't look like the Gold Cup winner on then. I mean, you've got to give Santini a bit of credit. I mean, he's been second in the Gold Cup. So, I mean, he's a good horse. And he's a good, solid galloper and stayer. So he's always going to set a good test. We did win. I was not over-impressed like everybody else. But I do think, you know, within a couple of days, we'd just found something that would suggest we might be able to sharpen this game up a little bit. And, you know, schooling this morning, as Nico said, he feels great. And he looked sharp, and he jumped sharp, and it's a completely different horse. So let's hope he's right. The one thing about this race is that it's absolutely wide open. You could take 8 horses, couldn't you? And you wouldn't guarantee you've got the winner. You probably would find it if you had 8 shots, but I mean, there is no standout horse. I've always thought Epatante was probably the most likely winner at the beginning of the season. Probably would say the same now. But there's an awful lot of players that have come into it in the meantime that could easily, you wouldn't be a shock. And it won't shock me if Chantry House wins. I'll be shocked with delight, yeah. But I wouldn't be over surprised. I think, you know, he won the 2.5 mile Novice Chase last year. He's not a slow horse, but he stays. So he's got everything in his, it's in there. It's in his vocabulary. It's got to come out, yes, but I'm optimistic to a degree that, you know, we're much, much sharper.
I suppose he's, in a way, I'm not comparing him to Autor, but Autor used to often hit that flat spot and you think he was beaten. Chantry House, slightly similar to that, and often he sort of just has to be just rode along it, but just to sort of remain.
Yeah, but that's what I'm thinking. That's why I'm saying what Nico was saying this morning after he'd schooled him. He said, blimey, he just took him in there. So he took me into every fence. Whereas it had to be that way, you know. Now he's taking Nico instead of Nico taking him. I like it.
The first race on the final day is the County Hurdle. You've won it twice before. You've got quite a few entries this year. First Street in there off 1-4-2, a 14-1 shot with Unibet.
He's been a pretty good revelation. I mean, he came here in the autumn. He'd never run in his life. He's meant to be a flat race horse, but he hadn't made it to the track for various reasons. We ran him in a couple of bumpers, and then he actually got beaten, but as it was my fault, we had to drop him in the first time because he looked as if he was going to race too keenly, and he was quite good and settled, finished very strong. Then he got beaten, but I wasn't too fussed. And then since when he's jumping, when we started hurdling, he's been very good. And he's gone from a novice to finishing 3rd in the Betfair Hurdle. Now, consequently, that's got him to 1-4-1-2, is it?
1-4-2.
That's probably high enough for a novice, you know, and that's all on the Betfair run. That would be a high enough rating for him at this stage of his life. He's very progressive.
And what about Broomfield Berg off 1-3-4?
Well, he might do. He was the horse that was sort of probably a favoured one of those in the Betfair. He came back with a little hind injury, which we're just sorting out at the moment. So I'm not sure he'll go there, but if he was, he'd be good enough anyway. He's a classy horse, yeah.
Balco Coastal?
Well, I think he's the other interesting one. Along with, I think the most likely 2 runners would be First Street and Balco Coastal. And Balco, I think I wasn't convinced he stayed the other day at Cheltenham when he was beaten by a horse of Kingy's. Said he ran very well. He looked like he was going to win at the last, and he sort of got run out of it. And he's a sharp horse, he's a quick horse. We've concluded that he didn't really stay. Now, if we're right, the county's going to suit him down to the ground. If we're wrong, he'll get outpaced. But stay on. Yeah, I'm quite keen.
So, Nicky, aside from your Shishkins and your Constitution Hills and your Champs, lots of good handicaps for punters to get their teeth stuck into. You know, which is going to be the Henderson horse to back at the festival at a slightly bigger price.
Well, it depends which one I want to put the knockers on, really, doesn't it? Because it certainly will. And I just think there are a few sort of squeaks here and there, and if you don't run, you won't win. I think the best chance would probably be Mr. Coffee. I think he is now coming into, favoured circumstances, and he can be. Yeah, I think he's he's a sound each way person, and I hope it go well.
I mean, the Irish wiped the floor with us 12 months ago. What have you made to the shape of the local domestic contingent over the whole 4 days from all of the stables up and down the country?
Well, I think there's a little bit more strength, don't you? I'd like to think. I mean, here we are. We're on the real optimistic side here. We've got to win the first one. I do think Edwardstone, King's Horse, will win the Arkle. 2. We might have to give them the Champion Hurdle, but Epatante's going to knock over some flowers. Unlikely, 2-1. But then as you go on each way, all the way through, you can see little chinks of light where there are some good English horses. Paul's horse in the RSA.
Brave Man's Game.
Brave Man's Game looks just going to be a tough race. He looks pretty solid. Yeah. The handicappers you can't talk for really, because last year we got so wiped out. We didn't just get beaten in the handicaps, they were finishing first, second and third. I hope the handicapper has given our horses a bit of a chance, or I hope he's given them less of a chance, because it was embarrassing and the parity had gone wrong somewhere. I mean, they cannot be that far ahead. Across that whole board, it was terrifying. So I hope we'll see some different results.
And you go there this year, happy with your team. You've got a nice, strong contingent. They're all fit, well, healthy. You wouldn't sort of change anything?
I don't think so. We've got a few issues we've got to keep our eye on, and so does everybody. I think the only thing we've got to do is just mind our own business. Not worry what Willie, Gordon or anybody else is doing. Just keep focused, keep your eye on everything, and hope they all get there.